Well, fuck-a-doodle-doo. Just when you thought the show was on its way out for a tidy little exit that brought two fan favourites back once more to tie up their respective journeys in a rather contrived manner, this story just decided to veer off in an opposite direction with a few beats that genuinely worked and some that made part of our investment ultimately fucking pointless.
We were never meant to win.
We open on Maggie, Ginny, Amaya and Tommaso venturing through the chemically compromised sewers where they devised a plan to get the fuck out of there fast, and Tommaso gets defensive over Amaya going through his bag to retrieve a flashlight for Ginny.
Whoa, no touchy. No touchy.
Following the credits, Negan and Pearlie start creeping through the city, and in a moment of respite, Negan tells Pearlie the news we've been waiting for him to hear all this time, and that was what happened to the five assholes and what they did to his wife. And upon realization, seemingly throws Pearlie for a moment, but he remains steadfast that Negan needs to be put away. However, they need each other to get off the island for now.
This ass is mine!
We shift back briefly to the sewers where the group discover a mountain of infused decaying bodies that Ginny tries to use as a scaling point to reach a manhole, but Maggie tells her that the military sealed them all up and says that she shouldn't be so desperate to return to Negan as she doesn't know the man that he is. We swing back to Pearlie and Negan who start wandering the streets, and Pearlie reveals that he was a state worker on the docks and devises a plan to cut part of them off and hopefully use them as a float, I assume. But as they get too chummy, walkers begin forming around them and they make a narrow escape, getting inside of a building and discover some artistic displays left around the city.
Yeah, I think it's a Banksy.
And meanwhile, we catch up with the sewer dwellers who take a moment to assess where to go next, but just off screen, Tommaso finds a couple of oxygen canisters that he passes off as being left there by the Barazzi in case they found themselves down there.
Oh, how convenient!
However, Maggie, being an ever-annoying observer that she is, figures out that this was planned. She accosts Tommaso over this, who tries to fob her off, but Maggie connects the dots and catches him out, which of course shocks Amaya, who realises they were never meant to win against the Croat, as he later explains upon his escape from the Croat, he was caught and forced to give up all the locations of the survivors in the city in return for his and Amaya's freedom, and that the return to the garden was intentional to wipe out the remnants. During this time, Negan and Pearlie walk the halls of the building they found themselves in and discover a body that pulled a trigger trap to axe themselves, and as they continue further, Negan grabs a walker to launch on Pearlie as he tries to escape.
Hey son, catch!
But Pearlie dispatches of the walker and catches up with Negan, who demands to know why he's doing this, to which he gets no response, but suddenly changes his tune over leaving Pearlie there as he can see his leg is getting worse and opts to help him instead. Back in the sewers, the gang take a breather and Maggie is starting to succumb to the effects of the environment as Tommaso warned, but is still refusing to use the oxygen canisters that were given earlier, and she tells Amaya that if they get out the city alive, she's welcome to come back with her and Ginny. But as the gang get comfy for a moment, they're attacked by the dead, who succeed in killing Amaya and Tommaso.
Oh, how unfortunate!
And after Maggie ensures that they remain that way out of respect, we catch up with the Croat, who arrives at what I assume is the headquarters for the dominating faction in the city, and is apparently not as revered as he'd like to be based on the muscle inside treating him like a little bitch, and after stepping through to her office, he steps before the Dama.
Who?
To inform her that everything went as planned and that the freedom fighters are all destroyed, but curiously she knows Negan as well, and demands to know where he is, but the Croat confesses that he got away for now, so she proceeds to berate him, but in such a way that reflects the audience's feelings over The Walking Dead as a whole.
The show started out with a bang. Kept me up all night, actually. But then there was a plot twist. You thought you had your hero, but he got away. And what good is a hero off stage? So naturally, the ending fizzled.
And their time in this episode concludes with the Croat revealing that they knew of the new Babylon authorities over this side of the shores, and believes that they're trying to assume a power takeover of Manhattan, which is why the Dama wants Negan. And we kick it back to Maggie and Ginny traipsing through the sludge, and Ginny sees her toy dino in Maggie's bag, who quickly becomes defensive as well, and explains that had Negan found out that she was here, it would destroy the chances of her retrieving Herschel and the supplies the Croat stole. Back on topside though, Negan and Pearlie hold up in a bus for a spell, and Pearlie explains his history and reveals that his brother Joe was an addict who caused constant trouble for him and his family when things were going. So Pearlie chose to walk away from him for years before the apocalypse came about, and as things fell, Pearlie forgot about Joe in escaping the city and left him to die, carrying that guilt with him to this very day.
B-E-A-beautiful.
And as we begin to wrap up, Maggie and Ginny run into an amalgamated walker composed of fused corpses that proceed to attack Maggie, and after dispatching of them all, she goes to catch up with Ginny, but the young lass has written on the walls, "Liar." And we flash back to Ginny's departure from Hilltop 2.0, where she discovers they still have the grain that Maggie claims was stolen.
I don't know. I think that's a bit dodgy, mate.
So she came to Manhattan to rescue Negan, knowing that this was a trap.
It's a trap!
And as Maggie escapes the sewers, we see what truly happened in a flashback of her own with Hershel's capture, where it's revealed that the Croat stormed Hilltop and took him in exchange for Maggie's assistance in luring Negan to Manhattan, and Ginny releases a warning flare to let Negan know that she's in the city. So, after how this season has performed so far, I've been pretty much singing its praises aside from the rather weak performance during the arena fight from last week. However, I do have a few criticisms following this one, starting with the fact that this episode does change the landscape of things in a big way, but calls into question Maggie's character, where she's now nestling in a sweet spot of confusion, as she's not necessarily a villainess just yet, or even an anti-hero, but instead is just a desperate mother, who has a chance to kill two birds with one stone by retrieving Herschel and disposing of her longtime rival, so she doesn't have to be the one to do it. But do the ends justify the means here, given the turnaround Negan's had since leaving the Commonwealth and everything that he's gone on to become? The man could be a bigger advantage in securing his rescue without having to turn himself over, as he's strong, determined, and clearly has a soft spot for kids, now being a father himself. It's a tricky moral dilemma, but I can see how Maggie would rationalise this in her mind, as Herschel aside, she's always threatened his execution but was never able to commit to it. As she can see, he's making considerable gestures to show his growth, but still wants to believe that Negan is that monster deep down inside, unknowingly becoming that monster herself if she chooses to go through with this. And I have to believe that they won't compromise her character like this, but then again, looking at the curveballs thrown in this episode, I wouldn't be surprised if they did pull the trigger, but I can't say I'm happy about it either, as both Herschel Sr., Glenn, Daryl, and Rick taught her better than this. Then, to the sudden turn of Tommaso, who knowingly killed all of his friends for the selfless act of saving himself and his girlfriend. This angle was oddly thrown in for me, but I assume it will make more sense going through a rewatch, but I can't say right now I understand the decision behind this. I don't know what the writers were hoping for in terms of a reaction to it, but as it is currently, I don't love this. If you're a survivor living in a city of uncompromising dangers at every corner, you'd either want to join up or get the fuck out of there. I understand for tension that there are factions in horror shows and movies like this, but this little group are barely scraping by, so why not join up, or again, just try and make it off land? I get it was the goal of the Croat to use Tommaso as an informant, but how could they always monitor his actions? There had to be opportunities for them to escape while he was busy with other survivors across the island.
No. He's got a point.
Anyway, before I get too far off on a tangent, another aspect that I was annoyed with from this is the time wasted with the survivors. The death of every single survivor felt hollow and cheap in the grand scheme of things, yet we spent so much time with them, getting to understand their plight, even going as far as naming a few, only to have them scrubbed out in a matter of minutes on screen. I know this isn't a unique writing choice to the show, but for fuck's sake, why even bother? Esther, Luther, Amaya, Tommaso, and every other fucker in this was just left to the wolves without so much as a moment of badassery. I mean, even Jesus got a moment on his way out of the show. Moving on though, but drawing back for a second too, what was the idea behind Maggie's refusal to use the oxygen canisters here, when they are naturally her only lease of life in a chemically filled nightmare, and given how fucked she became by the end, are clearly needed? I obviously understand that she refused to accept them on the grounds that they were from the Croat essentially, but woman, you want to see your fucking son again or not?
Who's the dumbass?
Whoa! Hey, how about a little professional courtesy here?
What's that, dumbass?
Say it again.
You want me to?
I dare you.
Dumbass.
It's decisions like these in a survival show that make me question the strength of writing teams. And my final note of concern more than criticism is the potential direction for Negan being repurposed as a leader among Manhattan's empire. This is what I assume is becoming the case, as there's a hierarchy being established here, and considering that both the Croat and the Dharma are familiar with Negan and his tactics, I assume that they think he's the best chance of creating something in Manhattan. The problem is, Negan has evolved, but I could see, following the disappearance of his wife and son, Ginny's involvement and Pearlie's hesitation to trust him, it wouldn't take a huge amount to flip that switch again. So my question for you is, if this is where they're headed, is this the right move? Personally, I don't think it would be, based on the work arcs that the series has put into his character, but the visual of seeing King Negan would be pretty fucking sweet. Anyway, that's enough of that for now, but I can't leave this episode without mentioning the elements that I did love. The turmoil between Maggie and Ginny was excellent and truly heightened those final minutes of tension when they were all that was left. It was good to see that the young girl was switched on and understood immediately what the fuck was going on. I don't know what she truly thinks regarding Herschel right now, though I can imagine with how perceptive she is, she knows that that part of the mission isn't a lie. But I love how determined she is, with Maggie mentioning that she has no idea who Negan was doesn't actually matter to her, as she just loves who he is. Negan is the only paternal figure she's had since losing her parents, and even though she doesn't verbalize her thoughts currently, she understands concepts like loyalty and trust, and Negan's natural persona never shies away. He's obviously always been upfront with her and clear about what he wants from this relationship, so of course Ginny would be more inclined to trust him over Maggie. Negan's team up with Polly is an interesting dynamic to follow should the show continue to a season 2, but I was a little conflicted with Negan trying to dispose of Polly only to seconds later flip that feeling and then save him. Then the realization of something bigger afoot in Manhattan with the Dahmer and the Croat is an interesting addition, if not a little tacked on here. And lastly, the revelation of the Croat approaching Maggie over Negan, turning this entire series on its axis and making this ultimately about our Batman, was an excellent swerve that I don't have an issue with in isolation, though I just wish it was introduced a little sooner. So overall, as plot twists go for one episode, both with Tommaso's deception, Ginny's discovery and Maggie's betrayal, these were certainly one way to go about it, but I am truthfully left with a variety of endings in my head for how this season will conclude, and none of them are particularly good. So I certainly feel the best way to leave this review is with an open mind as we enter next week's finale, and just pray that they have a justification for all this that will leave us satisfied till next time, or at least provide an idea of what the plot is here, as there's suddenly a lot of moving components now, and honestly more than there actually needs to be. And I am left feeling slighted somewhat, as I thought this would be a refined, simple tale about revenge and return, but instead we're given more than the time allows, and rather than use last week's episode to explore a little bit more, they wasted time with busy work that wasn't even something we could indulge in as long-time Walking Dead fans. So for now, we'll have to wait and see, but until next week everyone, thank you so much for stopping by. If you liked what you saw here, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this down the road, and until next time everyone, take care, and I'll catch you later.